The cold mountain wind cut through Zara Durfield's thin shawl as she stumbled along the narrow trail, tears freezing against her pale cheeks. 3 days since burying her husband, 2 days since being forced from their homestead, and now lost in these unforgiving Colorado mountains as the October sky threatened snow, her boot caught on a rock, sending her tumbling to the dirt path. The fall knocked what little breath remained from her lungs. Zara lay there, 23 years old and completely alone, wondering if she had the strength to rise again. "Madam, you all right?" the deep voice startled her. Zara looked up through tear-blurred vision to see a tall figure on horseback silhouetted against the darkening sky. She tried to answer but could only manage a broken sob. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He crouched beside her, and Zara found herself looking into concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a weather-worn hat. "You're half frozen," he said, his voice gentler than his rugged appearance suggested. Without hesitation, he removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Name's Nathan York, got a cabin 'bout a mile up this trail." "I'm Zara," she stammered through chattering teeth. "Zara Durfield." Nathan nodded once, assessing her condition with a practiced eye. "Mrs. Durfield, you're in no state to walk." Before she could protest, he gathered her into his arms with surprising tenderness. "Hold tight to me." He carried her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, and somehow managed to mount while still cradling her against his chest. Zara felt the solid warmth of him through his wool shirt as he adjusted her across his lap. "My things," she whispered, gesturing weakly toward her small travel bag. "I'll come back for them," he promised, and urged his horse forward. The rhythmic movement and Nathan's steady heartbeat beneath her cheek lulled Zara into a state between wakefulness and sleep. She registered the gradual change from open trail to pine forest, the smell of wood smoke growing stronger, until finally they reached a clearing. Nathan's cabin stood sturdy against the backdrop of mountains, smoke curling from the stone chimney. It wasn't large, but it was well built, with a small corral to one side where another horse nickered in greeting. "Almost there," Nathan murmured as he dismounted, still holding her securely. He carried her to the cabin door, somehow managing to open it without jostling her. Warmth enveloped them as he stepped inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a fire crackling in the hearth. Nathan carried her directly to a rocking chair near the flames and gently lowered her into it. "I'll make you some coffee," he said, moving to the cast iron stove in the corner. "Strong and hot, it'll warm you from the inside." Zara clutched his coat around her shoulders, watching him move efficiently around his home. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Nathan paused, turning to meet her gaze. "Out here, we look after folks in need. That's just how it is." His simple answer brought fresh tears to her eyes. She'd learned the hard way that not everyone shared that philosophy. "I lost my husband," she blurted out. 3 days ago, fever took him." Nathan's expression softened. "I'm mighty sorry to hear that, Mrs. Durfield. The banker came the very next day, said Thomas had borrowed against our homestead. I had until sundown to leave." Zara's voice broke. "I had nowhere to go. I was trying to reach Silverton where my cousin lives." Nathan handed her a steaming cup of coffee. "Silverton's a good 50 miles from here, not a journey to make on foot, especially not with winter coming on." Zara wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "I didn't have money for a stagecoach." Nathan nodded thoughtfully, then moved to the stove where a pot of stew simmered. "You need to eat, then rest. Tomorrow we'll figure things out." They ate in companionable silence, the stew rich with venison and wild vegetables. As warmth returned to her body, exhaustion claimed Zara. She found herself struggling to keep her eyes open. "Take the bed," Nathan said, noticing her fatigue. "I'll sleep by the fire." Too tired to argue, Zara allowed him to lead her to the small alcove where a bed stood, covered with a handmade quilt. "Thank you," she whispered. "Sleep well, Mrs. Durfield," he replied, drawing the quilt over her. "You're safe here." As consciousness slipped away, Zara realized it was the first time she'd felt safe since Thomas had fallen ill. Morning brought pale sunlight filtering through the cabin's single window. Zara woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The sounds and smells helped her remember coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, and the quiet humming of a man's voice. She rose from the bed, smoothing her wrinkled dress as best she could. Her hair had come loose from its pins during the night, and she quickly twisted it back into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Nathan turned as she emerged from the alcove. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. York, but I shouldn't impose further. If you could just point me towards Silverton." "It's Nathan," he interrupted gently. "And there's a problem with Silverton. First snow fell overnight, just a dusting, but it's a warning. The high mountain passes will be closing soon." Zara moved to the window and saw a thin layer of white covering the ground. Panic welled in her chest. "But I must reach my cousin. I have nowhere else to go." Nathan set a plate of bacon and eggs on the table. "Eat first, then we'll talk options." The food was simple but delicious. Zara hadn't realized how hungry she was until she began eating. Nathan joined her, his movements economical and precise. "I've been thinking," he said after they'd eaten in silence for several minutes. "I've got plenty of room here and winter's coming fast." "The passes might not open again until April or May." Zara stared at him. "Are you suggesting I stay here, with you, a man I just met?" A slight smile crossed his face. "I know how it sounds, but I've got a proposition that might ease your mind." He pushed his empty plate aside. "I need help running this place, tending the horses, keeping things in order while I'm out hunting or checking my trap lines. You need somewhere to stay until spring." "You want me to work for you?" Zara asked, surprised. "Work with me," he corrected. "As a partner of sorts. I've got a second cabin not far from here. It's smaller, but sound. You could stay there if sharing this space makes you uncomfortable." Zara considered his offer. The alternative was attempting a dangerous journey through mountains that had already claimed countless lives. What would people think? A widow living alone with a bachelor. Nathan's expression grew serious. "Folks around here mind their own business. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, but if it worries you, we could draw up a contract of sorts, make it all proper." "I don't know," Zara said, though in truth she was running out of options. "Just until spring," Nathan assured her. "By then, you'll have earned enough to pay for passage to Silverton if that's still what you want." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. He was handsome in a rugged way, with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines around his eyes. His dark hair was overlong, as if he cut it himself and didn't bother too often. "Why do you live out here all alone?" she asked suddenly. A shadow passed over his features. "Found I prefer the company of mountains to most people." He stood and began clearing the dishes. "Tell you what, let me retrieve your bag from the trail and you can take today to think on my offer." Before Zara could respond, Nathan had grabbed his coat and hat. "Rest up. I'll be back before midday." The door closed behind him, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts. She moved around the cabin, noting the small touches that spoke of the man who lived there: books stacked neatly by the hearth, a guitar in the corner, handmade furniture crafted with care. It was a bachelor's home, but a tidy one, not at all what she'd expected from a solitary mountain man. Thomas had been a farmer, always smelling of earth and sweat, their small homestead constantly in disarray despite her best efforts. Nathan returned as promised before the sun reached its zenith. He carried her travel bag, looking none the worse for having been left overnight. "Everything seems intact," he said, setting it down, "though you might want to check." Zara knelt beside the bag, quickly inventorying its meager contents: a change of clothes, her mother's cameo brooch, Thomas's pocket watch, and a small pouch containing their life savings. $3.17. "It's all here," she confirmed, embarrassed by how little she possessed. Nathan nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I need to check my trap line. Should take a couple hours. Plenty of time for you to decide what you want to do." After he left, Zara sat in the rocking chair weighing her options. Stay with this stranger until spring or risk the mountain passes alone. The choice seemed obvious when framed that way. When Nathan returned with 2 rabbits for their supper, Zara had made her decision. "I'll accept your offer," she said as he hung his coat by the door. "But I insist on a written agreement and I'll stay in the second cabin." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Fair enough, Mrs. Durfield." "Zara," she corrected him. "If we're to be partners of a sort, you should use my given name." "Zara," he repeated, and somehow the sound of her name in his deep voice made her cheeks warm. The second cabin proved to be a short walk through the pines. It was indeed smaller than the main cabin, but solidly built with a stone chimney and a small porch. Inside was a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small cookstove. "Built it thinking I might rent it to hunters or trappers passing through," Nathan explained as they stood in the doorway. "Never got around to it." "It's perfect," Zara said, meaning it. The cabin was dusty from disuse but otherwise clean. They spent the remainder of the day making the smaller cabin habitable. Nathan chopped wood while Zara swept and dusted. By evening, a fire crackled in the hearth and the bed was made up with fresh linens. As darkness fell, they returned to the main cabin for the dinner. Nathan had prepared rabbit stew with wild onions and potatoes from his root cellar. "Tomorrow I'll show you the property," Nathan said as they ate. "I've got 60 acres, mostly forest. Good hunting, a stream with trout, and a small meadow where I grow vegetables in summer." "It sounds lovely," Zara replied. "How long have you lived here?" 7 years, came west after the war." The mention of the war, which could only be the great conflict that had torn the nation apart, brought attention to his shoulders that Zara couldn't miss. "You fought?" she asked gently. Nathan nodded once. "Union cavalry, saw things no man should see." He fell silent and Zara didn't press. After supper, Nathan walked her to the smaller cabin, carrying a lantern to light their way. At the door, he handed her the light. "Sleep well, Zara," he said. "We'll start fresh tomorrow." Alone in her new home, Zara prepared for bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the forest night. She should have been frightened, a widow alone in the wilderness with only a stranger for company, but instead, she felt an unexpected peace. The days that followed established a routine. Nathan taught Zara how to care for the horses, how to identify edible plants in the forest, and how to maintain the cabins against the encroaching winter. Zara, in turn, applied her homesteading skills to improving their daily life. She mended Nathan's clothes, reorganized his pantry, and introduced new recipes that stretched their provisions. They typically worked separately during daylight hours, coming together for the evening meal which they alternated preparing. Their conversations gradually deepened as mutual respect grew. Zara learned that Nathan had been a schoolteacher before the war, which explained the books in his cabin. He'd come west seeking solitude after nightmares and memories made civilization unbearable. "The mountains don't judge," he explained one evening as they sat by his hearth. "They don't care what you've done or seen, they just are." Zara understood. After Thomas's death and her subsequent eviction, she too had felt judged by a society that offered little support to a woman alone. "Thomas and I were married 5 years, she told Nathan. "We had a small farm near Denver, not much, but it was ours, or so I thought." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "He never told me about the loans." Nathan's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held sympathy. "Men sometimes think they're protecting their wives by keeping troubles to themselves." "It wasn't protection, it was pride," Zara said firmly. "Now I have nothing." "Not nothing," Nathan corrected quietly. "You have skills, determination, and a place to stay until you decide what's next." His words comforted her in a way nothing had since Thomas's death. November brought heavier snows and shorter days. The mountain passes closed completely, confirming the wisdom of Zara's decision to stay. The second cabin proved warm and snug against the winter storms, though Zara found herself spending more time in the main cabin with Nathan, enjoying his company. One afternoon, as they worked together preparing venison from a deer Nathan had shot, Zara found herself studying his profile. The concentration in his blue eyes as he carefully butchered the meat, the strength in his hands, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face, all of it fascinated her in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. "Is something wrong?" Nathan asked, catching her gaze. Zara quickly looked away. "No, just thinking about how strange life is," she admitted. "A month ago I was a grieving widow with nowhere to go. Now I'm here learning to survive in the wilderness." Nathan wiped his hands on a cloth. "Do you regret staying?" "Not at all," Zara answered honestly. "I feel more alive here than I have in years." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight parting of his lips that made Zara's heart beat faster. For a moment she thought he might reach for her, but instead he returned to his task. "Good," he said simply. "I'm glad you're here." The first heavy blizzard struck in early December, confining them to the cabins for 3 days. On the second night, as the wind howled outside, Zara was startled awake by a sound at her door. "Zara," Nathan's voice called through the wood. "Are you all right?" She hurried to open the door, finding him standing there with a lantern, snow covering his shoulders and hat. "Nathan." "What are you doing out in this storm?" "Couldn't see your light," he explained, stepping inside as she moved back. "Got worried." Zara realized her fire had died down while she slept, leaving the cabin cold and dark. "I'm fine, just sleeping." Nathan nodded, visibly relieved. He moved to the hearth and quickly built up the fire again. "Storm's getting worse. Might be best if you came back to the main cabin until it passes." Zara hesitated only briefly before gathering a few belongings. The bitter cold made the decision easy, but something else influenced her too, a growing desire for Nathan's company that she wasn't quite ready to examine. The walk to the main cabin was treacherous, the snow nearly knee-deep in places. Nathan kept a firm arm around her waist, sheltering her from the worst of the wind with his body. Inside his cabin, the warmth was immediate and welcome. Zara sank into the rocking chair by the fire, letting the heat seep into her chilled bones. "Thank you," she said as Nathan brought her a cup of hot tea. "I didn't realize how bad the storm had gotten." "Mountain weather changes fast," he replied, stoking the fire higher. "You should take the bed, I'll sleep here by the hearth." But when morning came, Zara found that Nathan had not slept at all. He sat in a chair by the window, watching the storm rage outside. "Did you stay awake all night?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she joined him. "Someone needed to keep the fire going," he said, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested another reason. "The nightmares," she guessed softly. Nathan's slight nod was answer enough. "They come back with storms sometimes. The sound of the wind reminds me of things." Without thinking, Zara reached out and placed her hand over his. "You don't have to face them alone anymore." His eyes met hers, surprise giving way to something deeper. His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. For a long moment they sat in silence, connected in a way that went beyond words. The storm lasted another day, keeping them confined together. They cooked, read aloud from Nathan's books, and talked more openly than ever before. Nathan spoke of his family back east, parents long gone, a sister in Boston he hadn't seen in years. Zara shared memories of her childhood in Missouri, her journey west with her parents who had died of cholera, meeting Thomas at a church social. "Were you happy with him?" Nathan asked quietly as they sat before the fire that night. Zara considered the question carefully. "I was content," she finally answered. "Thomas was a good man, hard-working, but there was always something missing." She stared into the flames. "We never really talked, not like this. He had his work, I had mine. We lived parallel lives, not lives truly joined." Nathan's hand found hers again, his touch gentle. "You deserved better." When their eyes met this time, something had changed. The attraction that had been building between them could no longer be denied or ignored. Nathan leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Zara didn't move except to close her eyes as his lips met hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that escaped. "I shouldn't," he whispered against her lips. "You're still grieving." "I'm healing," Zara corrected, her hands moving to his shoulders, "and you're part of that healing." When they kissed again, it was with greater certainty, a promise of something neither had expected to find in these remote mountains. The storm finally broke the next morning, leaving a transformed landscape of pristine white. Nathan insisted on escorting Zara back to her cabin, though both felt the separation keenly. "We should be careful," he said as they stood at her door. "Take time to be sure of what we feel," Zara nodded, appreciating his restraint even as she longed for his touch again. "You're right. This is all happening so quickly." But the connection between them only strengthened as December progressed. They maintained separate cabins but spent most daylight hours together, working side by side, their hands finding excuses to touch, their eyes meeting in silent communication. Christmas approached, bringing a wistfulness to Zara. It would be her first holiday without Thomas in this strange new life she was building. 3 days before Christmas, Nathan disappeared for most of the day, returning with pine boughs and red berries for decorating. They spent the evening transforming his cabin, creating a festive atmosphere that lifted Zara's spirits. "I have something for you," Nathan said on Christmas Eve as they sat before the fire. He reached behind his chair and produced a small wooden box, beautifully carved with mountain scenes. "Nathan, it's exquisite," Zara breathed, running her fingers over the detailed work. "Did you make this?" He nodded, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "Been working on it whenever you were at your cabin. Open it." Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a mountain range hanging from a leather cord. "It was my mother's," Nathan explained as Zara lifted it with reverent fingers. "One of the few things I brought west with me. I've been saving it for someone special." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll wear it," he replied softly. "Say you'll stay when spring comes." The request hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. Zara met his gaze, seeing vulnerability there that matched her own. "What are you asking, Nathan?" He took her hands in his. "I'm asking if you might consider making this your home, not just until spring, but after with me." "As your housekeeper?" Zara asked, needing clarity. Nathan shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "As my wife, if you'll have me." The proposal, though not entirely unexpected given the direction of their relationship, still took her breath away. "We've known each other such a short time," she whispered. "Some folks court for years and never know each other as well as we do," Nathan countered. "Out here, life teaches you to recognize what matters, and you, Zara Durfield, matter to me more than anything." Zara looked down at the pendant in her hand, then back to Nathan's hopeful face. In that moment, she knew her answer with absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll be your wife." The joy that transformed Nathan's features was something Zara knew she would remember forever. He pulled her into his arms, his kiss full of promise and passion that left her breathless. They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, by a circuit preacher who braved the winter trails to reach them. The ceremony was simple, just the two of them and the preacher in Nathan's cabin, with the mountains as witnesses through the frost-covered windows. Winter slowly gave way to spring, the snow receding to reveal the lush life beneath. As April brought the first wildflowers, Zara and Nathan stood together on the porch of what was now their shared home, his arms wrapped around her from behind, her hands resting on the slight swell of her belly where their child grew. "Any regrets?" Nathan asked, his breath warm against her ear. Zara turned in his arms to face him. "Only that I didn't fall on that trail sooner," she teased, rising on her toes to kiss him. Nathan laughed, the sound echoing across the clearing. "I'd have found you eventually," he said with conviction. "Some things are just meant to be." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Zara knew he was right. The path that had brought her here through loss and tears to this man and this life had been difficult, but standing in the circle of Nathan's arms, she felt not just safe, but truly at home. The widow's tears had long since dried, replaced by the joy of a love she hadn't believed possible, and the promise of a future brighter than any she could have imagined on that cold October day when a cowboy carried her into his cabin and, unknowingly, into a new life.